Hi there. Today, we're diving into the everyday life of a person whose existence unfolded in the harsh, bleak, yet incredibly real world of the Middle Ages, in the story of the Comforter of Warriors. This is not a tale of heroic knights or great victories. It's a story of survival, routine, and the never ending struggle just to make it through another day. The life of the comforter is waking up in a damp cell, icy water, and bread with lard for breakfast, hard labor among wounds and moans in the infirmary, dirt, disease, the constant fear of plague, and a bone deep, unshakable fatigue. But before you get comfortable, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments which city you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. I'm really curious to see where everyone is joining us from. Now, get cozy. Let's begin. You wake up before dawn, not because you want to, but because the chorus of your daily discomfort refuses to let you sleep even a second longer than necessary. It is always cold here, the kind of cold that creeps into your bones and never truly leaves, no matter how many layers you wrap yourself in or how tightly you curl beneath the threadbare blanket that smells of mold, mice, and a little bit of something you cannot identify. Your cell, your home, as they once optimistically called it when they assigned you this wretched cubbyhole, is barely large enough for your straw pallet and the battered chest that contains your only possessions. The stone walls are forever wet to the touch, sweating an endless supply of dampness that gives rise to colonies of greenish black mold. You have named some of the patches simply because you see them more than you see the sky. The most impressive one looks vaguely like a hunched old woman, her spindly arms stretched out as if trying to smother you in your sleep. Above you, the tiny window lets in neither sunlight nor warmth, only the stale taste of yesterday's rain and the occasional whiff of smoke from the kitchens far below. If you are lucky, you will hear the caw of a crow or the distant clang of the monastery bell. If you are unlucky, you will hear the scuttling of rats as they patrol the corridor for crumbs and something more substantial. There are at least 3 of them. Yes, you counted, and no, you do not know why. Maybe it is because counting gives you the faint illusion of control. You stretch slowly as every muscle aches and every joint protests. There is straw poking into your back, straw that is older than some of the youngest novices. The more unfortunate news is that your straw is alive, alive with lice and fleas and the occasional beetle. You have become an unwilling host, a generous mother to whole civilizations of parasites. The itching has become a background symphony, one you have learned to ignore, at least until the nights when the biting becomes unbearable and you consider, for a fleeting moment, setting fire to the entire wretched bedding and sleeping on the stone floor. You could rise immediately, but you savor the last few moments of lying down, staring up at the low ceiling with its cracks and stains. You wonder, as you do every morning, if today is the day the roof finally caves in, ending your suffering with the efficiency that neither prayer nor duty has managed so far. There is a sense of routine in your misery. You know, without looking, exactly where your sandals are, waiting for your cold, calloused feet. You know, with grim certainty, that the water jug in the corner will be nearly empty, and the water inside colder than death. And you know, perhaps more than you wish, that nothing about this day will be any different from the last, except that you will be a day older and a little more tired, and perhaps, if you are lucky, a little more numb. You finally sit up, pushing aside the musty blanket, and your skin is immediately assaulted by the chill. Your dress, crumpled at the foot of the bed, is more patch than cloth by now, and you try not to think of the days when it was new, when it was a sign of honor and not a badge of endurance. With mechanical resignation, you pull it over your head, flinch as the rough fabric scratches your shoulders, and cinch it at the waist with a fraying rope. You stand, sway a moment, then make your way to the tiny table where your day old bread and yesterday's water wait. No one is coming to rescue you. There will be no sudden visitor, no forgotten patron with a sack of gold, no heroic knight with stories and songs. There is only you, the damp, and the familiar, suffocating realization that this is your life now, from the echo of the morning bell to the shivering dusk, again and again, until you die or worse, outlive everyone who remembers your name. As you step out into the corridor, the stones cold beneath your feet, and the air thick with the promise of another day's toil, you wonder, again, as you do every morning, how many more mornings you can endure. The answer, you suspect, is all of them, because there is no other choice. You force yourself to move, joints creaking in protest, feet shuffling along the uneven stones as you head toward the corner of your cell where your water jug awaits. The water is not clean. It never is. If you are lucky, there is only a thin film of scum on the surface. If you are not, you must first fish out whatever insect or rodent droppings have found their way in overnight, grimacing as you do so. The memory of once drawing clear, sweet water from a forest stream is something you have long since buried, like so many other things that belong to another, forgotten self. It is time to perform your morning ablutions, which is a grand way to describe what you actually do. You dip a rough rag into the cold, sour smelling water, wring it out, and scrub at your face and hands with as much enthusiasm as one might muster for scraping barnacles from a rotting hull. The water stings. Your skin is always chapped, your fingers split and raw from endless exposure to cold and grime. It does not matter. Nobody here is clean. Cleanliness is not a virtue. It is a rumor, a story for children, something whispered by mothers to babes who have never seen real filth. You would like nothing more than to scrub your entire body, to feel truly clean for a single heartbeat. But you cannot. There is never enough water for that. Each drop is precious, guarded jealously by the steward, whose beady eyes watch every bucket drawn from the well as if it were liquid gold. Besides, the cold is so fierce that to undress would be madness. Even your scant washing is a trial. Your teeth chatter, your lips turn blue, and the draft from the broken window is like 1,000 knives against your wet skin. Outside your door, The corridor echoes with the soft padding of other women shuffling to the communal privy, a place best avoided for as long as possible. You know that soon you too must brave it. There is no dignity to be found there. The stench begins halfway down the hall, a wall of odor that can bring tears to the eyes of even the most hardened souls. The wooden seat is slick with filth, and the buzzing of flies is so persistent that you wonder if they ever sleep. You hesitate, considering whether you might hold on until midday, but the reality of your own body refuses to be ignored. You shuffle down the corridor, face set in a grim mask, eyes focused on the cracked flagstones beneath your feet. No one speaks. Everyone is too tired for conversation, too busy pretending that they are not here for the same purpose. When your turn comes, you lower yourself onto the seat, doing your best to avoid contact with anything you do not absolutely have to touch. You do not linger. The cold, the smell, the shame, none of it encourages introspection. You finish quickly, clean yourself as best you can with a scrap of cloth that will be rinsed, reused, and passed along to the next unfortunate soul, and then you hurry back to your cell, holding your breath until you reach the threshold. You wash your hands again, or at least pretend to. There is no soap, of course. Soap is for the wealthy, for those whose lives do not revolve around muck and misery. You have not seen real soap in so many years that you sometimes wonder if you only imagined its existence, a relic from a fairy tale in which people lived lives of idle comfort and sweet smelling skin. You glance at yourself in the piece of polished tin that serves as your mirror. The face that stares back at you is pale and gaunt, eyes rimmed with red, hair escaping from your coif in wild, greasy strands. There is a smudge of something, mud, perhaps, or something less pleasant, on your cheek. You wipe at it with the rag, succeeding only in spreading it into a larger, more impressive smear. There is nothing to be done about it. You sigh, and not for the first time. You wonder why people speak of the glory of service, the honor of caring for the sick and wounded. There is no glory here, only filth and cold, and the knowledge that, no matter how hard you scrub, you will never truly be clean. With the rituals of false cleanliness completed, you set about tidying your cell. You shake out the blanket, sending a cloud of dust and fleas into the air. You arrange your pitiful possessions, a wooden comb with half its teeth missing, a cracked cup, a threadbare shawl, so that they look slightly less pathetic. You sweep the floor with a handful of twigs tied together by a strip of cloth, pushing the debris into the corners for the rats to collect later. Outside, the day is beginning in earnest. You hear the distant clang of the monastery bell, a reminder that time is passing, that the morning is slipping away, that you must hurry if you are to fulfill your duties. You take one last look at the cell, at the water-stained walls, the patched blanket, the ever-present shadows, and then you step into the corridor, bracing yourself for another day of unrelenting, unremarkable hardship. After all, hygiene is a battle you will never win. You are not meant to. Cleanliness is a luxury for another world, another life. Here, in the heart of the medieval reality, You are expected only to endure and to accept with stoic resignation the filth that clings to body and soul alike. You would think, in a place so endlessly gray and squalid, that prayer might offer some small comfort. Perhaps it does. For others, those blessed with faith as thick as winter wool, who can kneel on cold stone and feel the presence of something more than mildew and fatigue. But for you, morning prayer is simply the next unavoidable indignity, a duty performed with all the enthusiasm of scraping dried blood from a floor. The chapel is never warm. In summer, it is a tomb of old air and dry dust. In winter, it is simply another extension of the outside, only with more echoes and less hope. You enter with the others, silent as ghosts, each woman clutching her patched shawl about her shoulders and eyes downcast, as if by refusing to meet the gaze of anyone else, you might all collectively pretend you are somewhere better. No one speaks. The rules are clear: silence, submission, obedience. The only voices allowed are those in prayer, and even then, only in the prescribed words, repeated day after day until they have lost all meaning. Just sounds, like the endless tolling of the bell. You take your place, kneeling on a worn cushion so thin you might as well be kneeling on the stones themselves. Already your knees ache, but you do not move. The Mother Superior is watching, her sharp eyes scanning the room for the slightest sign of rebellion, the faintest flicker of inattention. You do not dare to fidget, though a flea bites your ankle and a sharp piece of straw jabs at your shin. The pain is a constant companion, as reliable as the prayers themselves. There is a moment every morning when the cold seems to seep through your bones and nestle in your heart, a heaviness that no amount of whispered Latin can banish. You try, for the sake of form, to mouth the words, O Lord, grant us mercy. O Lord, deliver us from evil. But your mind wanders. It is impossible not to. Your stomach aches with hunger, a deep, gnawing emptiness that drowns out thoughts of the divine. You wonder what the day will bring. How many wounded today? How many will die? How many will weep and beg for relief that you cannot give? The candles flicker, smoke curling in lazy spirals toward the dark rafters. The air is thick with incense, meant to disguise the smell of unwashed bodies, but the odor persists: sweat, mildew, old wounds, fear. Your head swims. You clutch your hands together, not in piety, but to keep them from trembling. As the prayer drags on, you steal glances at the others. Some are lost in genuine devotion, lips moving silently, tears leaking down wrinkled cheeks. Others, like you, recite the words without feeling, eyes hollow, minds far away. You wonder if they too think about leaving, about walking out of the monastery gates and never looking back. But where would you go? There is no home for you in the outside world, no place for a woman who has spent so many years steeped in the misery of others. Eventually, the prayers end. The Mother Superior signals with a curt nod, and you rise, your legs prickling with pins and needles, back protesting. You shuffle from the chapel, her gaze burning into your back, and join the slow procession toward the day's labors. There is no breakfast, not yet. First, the work, then, if you are lucky, a morsel of bread. Routine is your master. Every day the same. Prayer, work, prayer, meager food, more work, prayer again. There is a perverse comfort in the predictability, a numbness that settles over your thoughts and keeps the worst of your fears at bay. If you keep moving, keep obeying, keep your head down and your voice low, perhaps you can make it through another day without drawing attention to yourself. Attention is never good. Attention brings punishment, extra chores, nights spent scrubbing the privy until your hands bleed. You force your thoughts back into the present, following the other women down the corridor toward the larder. Your stomach growls, but you ignore it. Hunger is a constant, like the ache in your knees and the itch of your skin. It binds you to this place, to these people, to the unending cycle of duty and deprivation. Sometimes you wonder what the world is like beyond the walls of the monastery. You hear stories from passing merchants, tales of distant lands where the sun always shines and the air smells of flowers, not rot. But you know better than to believe in such places. Here, in the real world, hope is a luxury no one can afford. So you bow your head, clasp your hands, and mutter the words you have been taught since childhood. You pray not for salvation, nor even for relief, but simply for the strength to endure. One more day, one more prayer, one more round of routine. You have no illusions left. You know exactly what awaits you, and still you persist. The first meal of the day is not what you would call breakfast. It is not what anyone outside of this small world of hard stone and harder lives would call breakfast. The bell has rung twice, slowly, each note falling like a warning rather than a welcome, and you and the others gather in the refectory, a grand name for a long, cold room with a single row of battered benches and a scarred wooden table slick with age and use. You shuffle to your accustomed spot, careful to keep your eyes low and your elbows in. There is a pecking order here, as rigid as the ancient oaks outside the monastery gates, and you have no desire to challenge it. You know your place. You learned it quickly. Those who did not, who questioned or rebelled, did not last long. On the table before you, the meal awaits. You would laugh if you could muster the energy. It is the same every day. 2 pieces of bread, each so hard that you risk breaking a tooth with every bite, and a shallow wooden bowl filled with a thin smear of animal fat. If you are lucky, the fat is not yet rancid. If you are luckier still, the bread is only slightly green with mold. Today, you are neither lucky nor unlucky. The bread is rock-like but edible, and the fat is almost flavorless, which is something to be grateful for. There are no knives, no spoons. You use your hands, breaking the bread into pieces small enough to dip into the fat, chewing each mouthful slowly, mechanically. The bread tastes of old flour, dust, and a faint, persistent bitterness. The fat slides over your tongue, leaving behind a residue that will sit in your throat for hours. but you eat it all. You always eat it all. Hunger teaches gratitude for the most meager fare. The refectory is cold and echoing, every sound magnified. The soft crunch of bread, the wet scrape of bowls, the sighs and occasional coughs. No one speaks. Conversation is not forbidden, but it is discouraged, and besides, what is there to say? The subject of food is too dangerous, too fraught with longing. Better to keep your thoughts to yourself and your eyes on the table. Sometimes you remember a time when you tasted real food. Not often. Those memories are faded now, blurred at the edges, half dreamed. But sometimes you remember warm milk, thick with cream, poured into a pewter cup by gentle hands. You remember a stew, rich with chunks of meat and bright garden vegetables, served by candlelight on a feast day. That was another life, another world. It might as well have happened to someone else. You finish the bread. It sits in your stomach like a stone. There will be no more food until midday, and then only a watery soup, more punishment than nourishment. You stare at the empty bowl, willing yourself not to think about it. There is no use. Hunger is not a thing you can reason with. The others rise one by one, returning their bowls to the end of the table for the scullery maid to collect. She is young, no more than 12 years old, her hair shorn close to her scalp to keep the lice at bay. She moves quickly, eyes never meeting yours. You watch her for a moment, envying her youth, her apparent energy. She is thin, almost translucent, but she moves as though she has not yet learned how heavy life can be. When your turn comes, you stand, knees cracking, and shuffle to the door. The corridor beyond is colder still, the stones leaching what little warmth you manage to hoard during the meal. The air smells faintly of smoke, old grease, and despair. You wonder, as you do every day, how anyone survives this diet. The older women are all thin, their cheeks sunken, their hands gnarled like the roots of ancient trees. Their eyes are dull with perpetual hunger. The younger ones grow old quickly, their skin stretched tight over fragile bones, their teeth falling out long before their time. Illness stalks the corridors, dressed in many disguises, coughs, fevers, swollen bellies that speak of worms or worse. You do your best to ignore it. Thinking too much is a luxury you cannot afford. There are days when you dream of feasting, of tearing into roast fowl with your bare hands, of biting into a fruit so ripe that the juice runs down your chin. There are days when the dreams are so vivid you wake with your mouth watering, only to find the same hard bread, the same flavorless fat. It is a kind of torture, these memories, a reminder that you once expected more from life. But you are learning. Hunger is a teacher, patient and thorough. It strips away pretense, leaving only the bare bones of need. You eat what you are given, and you do not complain, because to complain is to invite punishment. There are always worse fates than an empty belly. As you leave the refectory, you catch a glimpse of the world outside through a narrow window. Gray sky, bare trees, a crow perched on the frozen ground, pecking at something too small and too sad to see. You think of the crow, black against the gray, and for a moment you envy its freedom, its simple animal hunger. Then you remember the crow eats carrion, feasts on the dead, survives by gnawing the bones of others. You are not so different, you think, as you return to your duties. You too survive by gnawing the bones of your former life, picking over what little remains, grateful for any scrap. There is nothing left to do but endure. You do not own much. The entirety of your wardrobe could fit in a basket smaller than the stale loaf of bread you gnawed this morning. This morning ritual, dressing for the day's burdens, is a meditation in monotony, another reminder that you are defined here not by who you are, but by what you endure. Your dress hangs from a crude wooden peg beside your bed, its hem ragged and darkened by years of mud, blood, and things best left unexamined. Once, when you first arrived, how many winters ago was that? It had been white, or so you were told. Now its original color is lost beneath a patchwork of repairs, every stitch a testament to some past indignity. You trace the seams with your fingers, feeling the uneven lines sewn by hurried, shivering hands, sometimes your own, sometimes another's, depending on who had the needle and thread and who had the strength to wield them. Getting dressed is an exercise in negotiation. The fabric is stiff from too many washings in water, too cold to dissolve anything but hope, but you have learned how to ease it over your aching shoulders. Your hands, cracked and rough, fumble with the fastenings. The cord at your waist has been knotted and re-knotted so many times that it more closely resembles a tangle of string than anything fit for a human garment. Still, it holds. That is all you can ask for. You do not own stockings. Those wore out long ago, and your feet, when not wrapped in strips of cloth torn from retired undergarments, are bare to the cold. Sometimes you find yourself jealous of the mice that scurry across the stone floors. Their fur, at least, is warm. Your sandals, such as they are, consist of leather so thin and cracked that you could probably pierce it with a fingernail. They serve their purpose to keep your feet from the worst of the filth. Barely. The other women dress alongside you, each lost in her own thoughts, her own sorrows. There is no laughter, no idle chatter, as you might imagine in the pages of a noble's romance. Here, everyone is too tired for talk and too aware that any sign of levity will be met with suspicion or worse. You tie up your hair in a knot at the nape of your neck, tugging the coif over your scalp. The fabric itches, but you are used to that. You are used to many things. Sometimes you wonder what it would be like to have a second dress, a garment for holy days, or simply for the joy of variety. You have heard stories, always second-hand, of women in the city who own 3, even 4 dresses. You cannot imagine what that would feel like to choose your clothing according to whim and not necessity. Here, choice is a fantasy and necessity a tyrant. Before you leave your cell, you take a moment to inspect yourself in the polished tin shard that serves as a mirror. What do you see? Not much. The face reflected there is neither beautiful nor ugly, merely tired. The dress, for all its patches and stains, hangs straight. The cord is tight enough to keep the cold out and the dress up. That will do. You smooth the fabric over your hips, ignoring the persistent itch where the seams rub your skin raw. You gather your meager tools for the day, a folded rag for cleaning, a bundle of herbs tied with twine, a cracked cup for water, and, tucked deep in your pocket, the stub of a candle saved from last winter's vigil. These are your treasures, such as they are. You count them as you leave your cell, silently reciting each item as if the act of naming them will grant you protection against loss. Loss is always waiting, after all, and you have learned never to grow too attached to anything or anyone. The corridor outside is bustling now, a river of women flowing toward their daily tasks. Some head to the kitchens, sleeves rolled high, and faces already smudged with ash. Others are bound for the laundry, dragging baskets of soiled linen behind them. You are destined for the infirmary, as always, your hands more familiar with the sick room than the sunlit courtyard. You walk quickly, avoiding the worst puddles on the flagstones, your breath clouding in the frigid air. As you pass, a few women glance your way, their expressions carefully neutral. You are neither friend nor enemy, simply another face in the crowd. You keep your gaze down, counting your steps, thinking only of what must be done next. Wash, carry, clean, repeat. The cycle is unbroken, the monotony absolute. Sometimes, on rare mornings when the ache in your bones is not so bad, you find yourself almost grateful for the simplicity. There is a comfort in the sameness, a dulling of the senses that makes endurance possible. The world beyond these walls is chaos, but here, in the ordered misery of the monastery, you know your role. There is power in routine, even if that power is only the absence of surprise. You enter the infirmary just as the first rays of gray light creep through the high windows. The day's work is waiting for you, buckets to fill, cots to straighten, wounds to clean, and endless suffering to witness and withstand. You take a deep breath, tasting the familiar blend of sickness, sweat, and despair. And then, without hesitation, you begin. Because what choice do you have? You have never liked the infirmary. No one does. It is not just the smell, although the smell is its own special torment, a layered miasma of blood, sour sweat, rotting wounds, urine, and the faint metallic tang of fear. It is not just the sights, though those are often enough to turn even the strongest stomach. No, it is the sounds that haunt you most. The endless low chorus of pain, moans, whimpers, the occasional scream bitten off by shame or exhaustion. In here, suffering is the language everyone speaks. You enter at first light, hands already stiff with cold, and are greeted by a sight so familiar you barely flinch anymore. The long rows of cots, their straw-filled mattresses sagging in the middle, their linen sheets yellowed and torn. The wounded lie in every possible position, twisted by pain, clutching at their wounds or at their only comfort, the hope that this morning might be different from the last. It never is. The air is heavy, thick with the stink of unwashed flesh. You move quickly between the beds, pretending not to notice the lice crawling through the hair of the man nearest the door, or the angry red swellings around his neck that you know better than to touch. The bucket at the end of the bed is already half full, a slop of vomit and bile and worse things. You tip it out into the barrel by the wall, wincing as the contents slosh, then return it without a word. Your first patient of the morning is a boy, no older than 16, his face twisted in a mask of pain. He was brought in 2 days ago, a gash down his thigh, crudely stitched by someone who cared more for speed than skill. The wound is angry and weeping, a yellowish ooze seeping from the sides. You murmur a greeting, voice flat, and he blinks up at you with the dull, wet eyes of a trapped animal. You clean his wound with a rag dipped in vinegar. He hisses, bites his fist, but you do not pause. Infection is the real enemy here, an invisible army more deadly than any blade. You have lost count of the number of times you have washed wounds only to watch the fever take hold anyway, the body succumbing to rot from within. When it happens, you can only offer comfort, a cool cloth for the forehead, a sip of weak broth, a whispered prayer. Not much, but it is all you have. The morning passes in a blur of motion. You change dressings, scrub chamber pots, wipe blood from the floor. You empty the buckets beneath the cots, careful not to splash yourself. There is always more to do than there are hands to do it. Sometimes, if you are lucky, another woman will come to help, and together you work in silence, each lost in your own thoughts. Most days, though, you are alone. One of the men, a grizzled soldier, his left leg gone from the knee down, tries to joke with you as you change his bandages. His voice is rough, his laughter forced. He flirts as some of them do, desperate for a distraction from pain or memory. You smile politely, not because you enjoy the attention, but because it is easier than explaining that you have nothing to give. Besides, a smile costs you nothing. The day will take far more before it is done. There are new arrivals this morning, fresh from the battlefield, their faces gray with shock and loss of blood. You hear their stories whether you want to or not, tales of chaos and slaughter, the clash of steel, the stink of spilled bowels. One man sobs quietly as you clean the jagged wound on his arm, his voice a string of nonsense prayers. Another simply stares at the ceiling, lips moving in silent curses or blessings. You cannot tell which. You see things in the infirmary you cannot speak of to anyone, not even yourself. You see the bodies brought in at dawn and carried out at dusk, wrapped in rough linen, faces hidden. You see wounds that will never heal, shattered limbs, caved chests, the slow black spread of rot. You see the lucky ones, those who die quickly in their sleep, without ever waking to the true misery of their fate. It is not only men who suffer here. Sometimes women arrive, wives, daughters, servants, caught in the wrong place at the wrong time, their bodies broken by more than just war. For them, you reserve your quietest words, your gentlest touch. Their eyes are always wide, always haunted, as if they can see some truth you have not yet learned. By midday, your apron is stained with blood and pus, your hands reek of vinegar and old wounds, and your back aches from bending, lifting, and carrying. You have already emptied the slop buckets 4 times. Yes, you count, because counting keeps you sane. The meal bell rings, but you barely hear it over the noise of the ward. Another cry of pain, another retching cough, another voice begging for water. You take a moment, just one, to stand at the window and look out at the pale winter sun. It is weak as you feel, and you envy its freedom. But you do not linger. There are always more wounds to tend, more suffering to witness, more bodies to clean. The only certainty in the infirmary is that there will always be more. You do not allow yourself to think about tomorrow. Amidst the filth and the endless parade of wounds, you have learned to notice the smallest moments of respite. Not joy, no, that word does not belong to this world. Not really, but a shadow of it, the ghost of something lighter that flickers and dies almost before you can name it. You cling to these moments out of necessity, the way a drowning person clings to driftwood, knowing that without them you would simply go under. Sometimes it is as simple as a fleeting smile. There is a boy in the farthest cot, his arm set in a crude splint, who mouths jokes to you when the others are not watching. They are not clever jokes. Most do not even make sense, but you find yourself grinning in spite of yourself, and for a few seconds, the ache in your back eases. When you laugh, you do so quietly, so as not to attract attention. Laughter here is rare and therefore suspicious, as if joy itself might be contagious and is best quarantined. Once, a soldier gave you a tiny wooden carving, a bird, awkward and unfinished, the wings chipped. He pressed it into your palm with trembling fingers, not looking you in the eye. For a day or two, you kept it hidden in your sleeve, rubbing your thumb over the worn surface whenever the world felt too heavy. You tried to give it back when he died, but the body was taken away before you could say goodbye. Now the carving sits on your cell's windowsill, the only object in your life not required by duty or necessity. When you look at it, sometimes you remember that you are more than just hands and exhaustion. Then there are the rare moments when the sun slants through the infirmary's high window, falling in pale bands across the filthy floor. The light makes dust motes shimmer like tiny stars. You watch them float and spin, and for the space of a breath, you almost believe in beauty. That feeling never lasts. A groan or a cough, or the squelch of a wound being cleaned, pulls you back to reality. Still, you cherish those instants, brief as they are. But disappointment always lurks close by, eager to snatch away even these modest comforts. You might spend an hour coaxing a wounded man to eat, softening his bread in broth, only to have him vomit it back up as soon as you turn away. You might bandage a wound, thinking you have done everything right, only to find it worse the next day. Black lines creeping outward like cracks in old plaster. You may whisper words of encouragement, promise that the pain will lessen, that he will walk again, that he will live. Sometimes you believe these words, more often you do not. Still, you speak them because you must. Hope is a tool as necessary as vinegar or bandages. You are often surprised by the resilience of some, how a battered man will sit up, grin with half his teeth missing, and ask for a drink as if nothing were amiss. Just as often, you are confounded by how quickly others give in, how a small cut becomes a death sentence, simply because the man cannot muster the will to survive. You never know which way it will go until the end. The strong die, the weak recover. The ones you pin your hopes on are the first to slip away. There are disappointments outside the infirmary as well. You might wait days for a promised delivery of clean linen, only to receive a bundle so badly patched and stained that even the rats turn up their noses. You may petition the steward for more vinegar or for an extra loaf of bread, only to be met with a snarl and a lecture about wastefulness. You try not to hope for small mercies, but still, you find yourself hoping against all reason and are disappointed every time. You have learned to distrust comfort, to look at every pleasant thing as a trap. A day without new arrivals means a day with more time to clean, but it also means that soon a new batch of suffering is coming, and the brief respite is only a lull before the next storm. A meal that is not wholly unpalatable feels like a trick, and you eat it quickly, expecting someone to snatch it away. When a patient recovers enough to leave, you are proud, yes, but the pride is sharp edged. The bed he leaves behind will not stay empty for long. Sometimes you think the beds themselves hunger for bodies, the straw always eager for new shapes, new stains, new stories. When you strip the sheets and carry them to the laundry, you mutter a prayer for the next soul who will lie there, though you do not truly believe it will help. In rare, unguarded moments, you let yourself imagine another life, a world where small joys are not punished by greater disappointments, where laughter is not an act of defiance. You picture a day spent walking in sunlight, a table set with bread that is soft and white, a night when your sleep is not haunted by the faces of the dying. These thoughts are dangerous, so you push them away. You have become an expert in disappointment. You know its taste, its weight, the dull ache it leaves behind. Yet still you rise, still you work, still you find those fleeting moments to savor, because the alternative is unthinkable. You are not made of stone, not yet. So you count your small joys where you can find them: a smile, a scrap of wood, a shaft of sunlight, and brace yourself for the disappointments to come. Because in this life, disappointment is the only certainty, and hope, stubborn and persistent, is the one thing you cannot quite bring yourself to abandon. Noon brings with it a familiar sense of anticipation, though not the kind you once felt as a child at the prospect of a feast. Here, anticipation is just another name for dread, tinged with that desperate, low hunger that lives in your gut like a rat gnawing on the floorboards. The lunch bell sounds, a dull clang, as indifferent as the rest of the world, and you follow the shuffling line of women to the refectory. Your legs are heavy, and your stomach twists not just from hunger, but from the knowledge of what awaits you. The refectory is no more welcoming than it was this morning. If anything, The cold has crept in deeper, and the air is thicker with the odors of old food, unwashed bodies, and damp stone. You sit where you always sit, elbows tucked in, eyes down. Every woman here is an island of isolation, walled off by exhaustion and the shared understanding that hope is a dangerous luxury. The meal is delivered by the same scullery maid, her face set in a permanent scowl. You watch as she ladles out a portion of what they call soup, though the word is an insult to soups everywhere. It is mostly water, faintly clouded by a memory of vegetables, turnip, perhaps, or something even less dignified, floating alongside the occasional lump of something pale and unidentifiable. It steams faintly in the bowl, promising warmth if nothing else. You stir the soup with a hunk of bread that is somehow both soggy and hard, marveling at its ability to defy the laws of nature. When you bring the spoon to your lips, you taste mostly salt and disappointment, though you are careful not to complain. Complaints are a form of currency here, one that is always repaid in punishment or humiliation. You force the food down, one careful mouthful at a time, chewing slowly to stretch out the meager meal. There are surprises in every bite: a piece of grit, a suspiciously soft chunk of what might once have been a root, a hair that does not belong to you. In the corner of your vision, a fat, glossy rat scurries along the edge of the floor, emboldened by the knowledge that no one here will bother to chase it. The rats are your only constant companions, as at home in the monastery as you are, and perhaps more so. You glance down at your bowl and see that a beetle has found its way into the thin broth, legs waving slowly as it struggles to free itself. You fish it out, shake it off, and set it aside. Once, the sight would have turned your stomach. Now you hardly notice. The line between what is edible and what is not has blurred over time. You remember stories of famine from your childhood, tales of people boiling leather and chewing on grass. Here, you eat what you are given and thank whatever indifferent saint is listening that it is not worse. Around you, the sounds of eating are punctuated by coughing, throat clearing, the scrape of wooden spoons against rough bowls. No one lingers over lunch. Meals are not social occasions. They are chores to be completed, fuel to be swallowed. Conversation, if it happens at all, is carried out in murmurs, voices pitched low to avoid the attention of the stewards and to keep the rats from thinking they are being talked about. There is a hierarchy even in misery. The women with slightly better portions, who sit closer to the fire, if a few glowing coals can be called a fire, are those who have earned favor or who have learned how to beg more effectively. You are not among them. Your place is by the wall, in the shadows, where the cold seeps in and the scraps are always just a little smaller. After the meal, you carry your bowl to the end of the table and stack it with the others, careful not to let the greasy residue touch your hands. Soap is a fantasy, a legend whispered among children and old women who remember better days. Instead, you wipe your hands on your dress, adding another layer to the tapestry of stains that marks your progress through the days. You return to your duties, stomach heavy and unsatisfied, and see the rat again, bold as ever, nibbling on a crust dropped under a bench. For a moment, you envy its simplicity. No duties, no prayers, no need to pretend at hope. Just hunger and survival. You wonder, not for the first time, what it would be like to be so free of care, to think only of the next scrap, the next safe corner. But you are not a rat, and you have responsibilities. There are bandages to wash, wounds to tend, beds to straighten. You swallow your envy along with the last bitter taste of lunch and move on. Later, as you scrub the floors of the infirmary, you find yourself humming a tune you barely remember. The sound is lost in the clatter of buckets and the shrill laughter of the other women. You keep your head down, focused on the rhythm of your work, and try to ignore the crawling feeling at the back of your neck. There are lice in the seams of your dress, and you know they will keep you awake tonight, but there is nothing to be done about it now. As the light outside fades, you catch a glimpse of your reflection in a pane of rippled glass. You look older than your years, hollow eyed and gaunt, but your hands are steady and your posture is straight. You have survived another meal, another day. You have learned to accept the dirt, the hunger, the company of rats and insects, because you must. Endurance, you think, is its own kind of victory, however small. If there is a universal truth in this place, it is this: there is always more filth than water, always more grime than cloth, and always more stains than there are hands to scrub them. Laundry and cleaning, such tidy words, conjuring images of fragrant linens snapping in a summer breeze, means something very different in your reality. Here, these chores are not just part of your day, but the slow grindstone against which your will is worn down hour by hour. The laundry itself is a dank outbuilding wedged between the kitchen midden and the pig pens. Its roof leaks in 3 different places, and the floor is a slick of mud, offal, and runoff that is never dry. You haul baskets of soiled linen, sheets, bandages, rags, underclothes, all mottled in shades of brown, yellow, and red, out into the cold light of day, stacking them in a pile that looks, from a distance, like the world's most depressing snowdrift. You are given water to wash with, but never enough. Buckets are doled out by the steward as if they contained the blood of saints, not the cloudy runoff from yesterday's rain. The water is icy, numbing your fingers within moments, and turns to slush around your ankles when spilled. You soak the linens as best you can, kneading them against a board worn thin by years of similar abuse. The smell rises in choking waves: old urine, sweat, decay, and, in the worst cases, the sweet sick stench of rot. You add handfuls of ash to the water, rubbing it into the fabric as your mother once taught you, long ago and far away. There is no soap, at least, not for you. Soap is reserved for those who matter, which is never the likes of you. Ash is what you have, and if you scrub hard enough, it almost works. Your hands are soon raw and bleeding, the skin peeling in strips. You bite your lip to keep from crying out, knowing the others would only glare or, worse, offer false sympathy. If you are unlucky, A senior nun will decide to supervise, her eyes sharp for any sign of laziness. She will point out every missed stain, every rag not wrung thoroughly enough, every bandage that looks more gray than white. You learn to nod, to keep your head down, to mutter apologies even when you are too exhausted for shame. After the wash, you haul the sodden mass outside and drape it over lines strung between splintering posts. In the summer, flies gather in clouds, drawn by the scent of blood and sweat. In winter, the linen freezes solid, turning the courtyard into a landscape of stiff, ghostly banners. Either way, the result is the same: scratchy, half clean cloth that carries the memory of every patient who ever bled, sweated, or wept upon it. Cleaning the living spaces is no more rewarding. You sweep the flagstones with brooms made from bundled twigs, stirring up clouds of dust, mouse droppings, and bits of straw. The dust gets into your nose and throat, leaving you coughing for hours. In the corners, you find things best left unnamed: the shriveled bodies of rats, the shells of bugs, crusts of old bread turned blue and fuzzy. You mop the floors with buckets of cold water and more ash, scrubbing until your shoulders ache and your knees creak. Some stains never come out: ink from a dropped vial, a dark smear from a spilled chamber pot, the rust red shadow of old blood. You learn to look past them, to see only the places that are less filthy than before. Every so often, a superior will pass by, nose wrinkled, skirts lifted. She may sniff and mutter about the state of things, as if you could conjure miracles from thin air. Once, one suggested you pray for cleaner floors. You did, for a week. It did not help. Sometimes your cleaning is interrupted by emergencies: a spilled bucket, a patient soiling his bed, a sudden rush of newcomers from the field. You drop everything and hurry to help, knowing that every delay will only mean more work waiting later. The day becomes a blur of motion: scrub, wring, carry, empty, repeat. You wash your own hands whenever you can, though the water makes the cracks sting. There is no privacy, no dignity in any of it. The other women glance at you from time to time, some with sympathy, others with resentment. Everyone thinks her lot the hardest, and perhaps they are right. Misery is not a competition, but it does seem to breed a certain pettiness. As evening approaches, you gather up the last of the linens, now stiff and scratchy, and stack them for distribution. You check the beds in the infirmary, swapping out the worst of the soiled sheets, wrinkling your nose against the smell. The work is never finished. No matter how hard you scrub, the dirt always wins in the end. But you endure. You have learned that endurance is the only virtue truly required here. When you finally return to your cell, your hands are raw, your back aching, your nose still full of the scent of blood and lye. You collapse onto your pallet and let yourself rest, if only for a moment, knowing that tomorrow will bring the same duties, the same stains, the same unending battle against filth, and perhaps, if you are very lucky, a bucket of water that is only a little bit gray. You have discovered that in addition to cleaning wounds and laundering the filth of the world, you are also expected to tend to wounds of the soul. They never phrased it quite like that. No one in the monastery has the time or energy for poetic turns of phrase, but the reality is clear. When night falls and the worst of the day's labor is done, you become not just a nurse, not just a laundress or scullion, but also a makeshift confessor, a human sponge for the grief and guilt that saturate every stone of this place. There is no confessional booth, no carved wood, no privacy, no velvet curtain to shield the broken from the gaze of the world. Instead, confession happens wherever there is a shadow and a moment of quiet, by a patient's bedside as you change his bandages, on a bench near the kitchen garden where the sick limp for a moment's fresh air, in the corridor as you pass a shivering novice who looks at you with eyes wide and desperate, as if you are the only lifeline left in a world of drowning men. The confessions are rarely about great sins. Most of them are about hunger, about anger, about the ways survival shapes people into strangers, even to themselves. A boy admits to stealing an extra scrap of bread, then weeps with shame as if he has murdered a king. A soldier confesses to running from a fight, his voice barely a whisper, as if the walls themselves might judge him. A woman, face lined with hardship, admits she wishes her husband would not return from the war because she fears she has forgotten how to love anything but her own fear. You do not absolve them. That is not your right. You are not a priest, but you listen. Sometimes that is enough. Sometimes it is the only mercy left. You have become an expert in the art of nodding, of murmuring the right words. It is understandable. You are not alone. No one is without sin. The phrases have become worn smooth with repetition, as automatic as the way you tie your apron or sweep the floors. There are harder confessions, too, ones that settle in your bones and haunt you long after the speaker has gone. A young woman confides, voice shaking, that she is with child by a man she does not love, a man who will never claim her or the child. She asks if you think God will forgive her. You want to say yes, but the words stick in your throat. You say something about God's mercy, about how suffering brings understanding. It is not enough. It never is. Some come to you not to confess, but to rage. They curse God, fate, their parents, their leaders. They shout or weep or simply sit in silence, waiting for you to say something that will make the world bearable again. You do not have the words. You wish you did. Sometimes, in the quiet moments between confessions, you wonder who will listen to yours, who will hear the weariness in your voice, the secret anger that blooms like mold in your chest. You do not remember the last time anyone asked how you were, truly were. Perhaps it does not matter. You are not here to be comforted. You are here to comfort. The act of listening is its own labor. It wears you down, like scrubbing floors or carrying buckets. You begin to recognize the patterns in people's pain, the way regret always circles back to what might have been, the way guilt twists even the smallest joys into something sharp and unpalatable. Sometimes you find yourself thinking that suffering is a kind of ritual here, an offering to whatever gods might be listening. If that is so, you are the vessel, the altar, and the sacrifice all at once. After particularly hard days, you go to the small chapel after evening prayers when the shadows are long and the air is thick with incense. You kneel not to pray for others, but to whisper your own burdens into the darkness. You do not expect answers. The stone and stained glass are as indifferent as the sky. Still, the act brings a strange comfort, a reminder that even unheeded prayers are better than none. Sometimes the men in the infirmary ask you for stories. You tell them tales from your childhood, tales of saints and sinners, of miracles and monsters. The stories are always the same, and yet they are always new because the listeners are new. One day here, the next day gone. They thank you sometimes, and that gratitude is more nourishing than any meal. You see the change sometimes after a confession. A man will sleep more easily, or a woman will eat a little more, as if a stone has been lifted from their chest. But just as often, nothing changes at all. The world remains heavy, the air thick, the shadows long. You learn not to take it personally. You are not here to save anyone. You are here to bear witness. It is a strange sort of intimacy, this communion of suffering. You know secrets you will never speak, stories you will never repeat. You carry them with you, invisible but heavy, a burden and a privilege both. There are nights when you lie on your pallet and think of all the confessions you have heard, all the pain you have absorbed. You wonder if, at the end of your life, someone will listen to your story, will nod and murmur that you too are forgiven. But you know better than to hope for absolution. Here, hope is a candle in a drafty room, flickering, always on the edge of going out, and still you listen, because sometimes that is all there is left to do. If there is one specter more persistent than hunger or cold in your world, it is the shadow of disease. Illness is the constant companion of every breath, the silent predator that stalks your steps from dawn to dusk. You have learned to fear coughs and rashes more than any sword or arrow. In a monastery full of the weak, the wounded, and the desperate, even a sneeze is cause for alarm. You have watched it happen too many times. First, a cough, barely more than a tickle at the back of the throat, easy to ignore. Then, a flush of fever, cheeks gone red, and eyes glassy. Before long, the patient's sheets are soaked in sweat, the skin broken out in angry spots or gone sallow and gray. Sometimes it is the pox, sometimes the bloody flux, sometimes a sickness that has no name, just an inexorable grip that tightens until the suffering ends. Worst of all is the plague, always whispered, never named outright, as if the very syllables would summon it from the shadows. You remember your first outbreak. The memories are as sharp as broken glass. The hurried whispers, the doors barred from within, the rows of bodies laid out in the chill of the chapel, because there was no room in the earth for so many at once. You can still recall the smell, a sour, sweet rot that clings to your hair, your skin, your very bones. It never really leaves. Fear becomes routine. Every cough, every shiver, every patch of swelling is a warning sign, a reminder that no one here is safe, no matter how pious, how careful, how clean. You scrub your hands with vinegar until the cracks bleed, but the fear seeps in anyway. You watch the faces around you, tracking the pallor of cheeks, the wetness of eyes, the way someone hesitates before standing, as if gravity has become suddenly cruel. Rumors move faster than disease. Someone in the kitchens whispers that a baker's apprentice is ill, and by the afternoon, the entire monastery is buzzing with terror. Suddenly, everyone remembers a mysterious ache, a headache that would have been ignored yesterday, but today feels like the beginning of the end. You try to keep your composure, to move with purpose and calm, but your heart races and your hands tremble. The leadership, such as it is, attempts to impose order. Rules multiply like lice. No gathering in groups, no touching, no sharing of bowls or bread. You are told to burn old straw from the beds and scrub every surface with more vinegar and ash. You do as you are told, knowing it is more about keeping up appearances than fighting the true enemy. Disease does not care for rules. It slips through cracks, lingers in shadows, laughs at your feeble efforts. When someone falls sick, the process is both familiar and horrifying. First comes the isolation. The patient is moved to a small room at the end of a corridor, a place that's already heavy with the memory of previous occupants. You visit, carrying broth and herbs, always holding your breath, always wondering if this is the moment the sickness leaps from their skin to yours. The patient pleads not to be left alone, but you know better than to linger too long. You have seen strong men reduced to weeping children by fever, watched women claw at their own flesh in the grip of delirium. You have whispered prayers over bodies that are still warm, knowing the only real comfort you offer is your own trembling presence. You have witnessed the silence that follows a death, the way it settles over the monastery like a blanket, muffling all sound, all hope. Sometimes you hear of whole villages wiped out in a week, not a soul left to bury the dead. These stories reach you from travelers, from merchants with frightened eyes and quick voices. You wonder if it is only a matter of time before your monastery becomes another tale told in hushed tones, another place marked on a map by nothing more than a patch of brambles and wildflowers where the stones once stood. Superstition thrives in this atmosphere of fear. Some say that a black cat crossing the yard heralds a new outbreak. Others claim that hanging bundles of certain herbs above the door will ward off the sickness. You do not know what you believe anymore. You hang the herbs, say the prayers, cross yourself when a crow caws at midnight. You do it all, knowing it is probably useless, but unable to resist the desperate hope that it might help just this once. What is left of community splinters under the strain. People begin to avoid each other, faces turned away, steps quickened. Old friends become distant, wary of the risks each conversation might bring. A cough is enough to clear a room, a fever enough to make a woman a pariah. You find yourself longing for touch, for comfort, but shying away from it at the same time. And yet, The work continues. Wounds must be cleaned, bandages changed, water fetched, bodies buried. You keep going because there is no alternative, no pause allowed. The fear is always with you, a weight on your chest, an itch at the back of your mind. It shapes your dreams, turning even sleep into a source of anxiety. You wake in the dark, heart pounding, certain you have caught the sickness, certain you will not see another dawn. Then the sun rises and the day begins again, and you count yourself among the lucky, at least for now. There are moments when you wonder if the fear itself is worse than the sickness, if living in a perpetual state of vigilance is not its own kind of plague. But you have learned not to ask such questions aloud. The walls have ears, and hope, like laughter, is best kept to a minimum. So you wash, you pray, you watch, and you wait. Because in a world ruled by disease, survival is less about strength and more about luck, and you know better than to believe yourself immune to either misfortune or despair. When the light outside begins to bleed into the blue of twilight, your day is not ending. It is merely changing shape. If you are lucky, there is a brief pause, a moment to lean against the cold stone and count your breaths before evening tasks begin. But more often, the transition is seamless. The needs of the sick, the demands of the wounded, and the calls for help care nothing for the hour. The ward in the evening is a place of uneasy quiet, filled with the hollow sighs of the exhausted and the feverish. There are fewer visitors now, and the faces of your fellow workers are as pale as the moon. You move from bed to bed, arms leaden, hands already swollen from the endless scrubbing and carrying of the day. Your first task is always the dressings. Bandages must be checked, changed, rewound. The sight is grim, blood that has seeped through linen and dried into a dark, stiff crust. Wounds that ooze despite your best efforts, some sweet smelling with infection. The work is slow, methodical, repetitive. You have learned to look without truly seeing, to keep your mind distant while your hands move with mechanical care. Some wounds are healing, pink and closed. Others have only worsened, the flesh puckered and angry. Sometimes you wonder if the wounds mirror the world. Some things get better, most only fester. There is rarely enough light. You squint in the flickering glow of tallow candles, wax dripping onto your knuckles as you work. Shadows move along the walls, stretching and shrinking as you turn. You know these shadows, the bent woman hunched at the end of a bed, the crooked nose of the head nurse, the odd, half-formed shapes of your own hands in the wavering light. You count on the shadows, even as they remind you of all that remains hidden. Some of the patients are grateful, whispering words of thanks or clutching your arm for comfort as you work. More often, they are sullen, feverish, or simply too tired to speak. A few lash out, flinching from your touch or cursing you under their breath. You accept all this with the patience of habit. Pain and frustration find their nearest target, and you, being present, will do. Once in a while, someone asks for prayer. Sometimes it is the dying, sometimes the merely desperate. You oblige, because refusal would be unthinkable, even though your own belief has worn thin as the sheets you launder. The prayers are old, memorized since childhood, rattled off with a voice that hovers between hope and resignation. O Lord, look with mercy on your servant, heal the wounds of flesh and soul. You mouth the words, feeling the shape of them more than their meaning. Faith in your hands is ritual more than solace. You light more candles as darkness deepens. You murmur encouragement, even if you no longer believe it yourself. The worst is over. You will be better soon. Rest. You straighten the covers, cool fevered foreheads, refill cups with weak broth or watered wine. You coax those who can eat to take another spoonful, knowing all the while that for some it is the last they will ever taste. Your own body aches as much as those you tend. Your back throbs, your knees crack, your hands sting with 1,000 small cuts. You have learned to live inside the pain, to treat it as another part of your uniform, like the rough wool of your dress, the constant dirt under your nails, the stale scent of vinegar on your skin. Fatigue is now the bass note of your existence, overlaid with sharper scents of pus and sweat. When the ward quiets at last, you gather the soiled linens and discarded bandages, carry them out to the laundry, and scrub your hands in a bucket of cold, gray water. Sometimes, in the darkness, you pause and let yourself look out the window, where the last colors of sunset cling to the sky before slipping into night. You allow yourself a single deep breath, a moment of air untouched by sickness, untainted by pain. But even then, the evening is not truly yours. Prayers are called in the chapel, a final ritual before sleep. You kneel with the others, bodies crowded together, each woman reciting words she has spoken 1,000 times. You pray for the sick, for the dying, for those already gone. You pray for your own hands, that they might not fail tomorrow. You pray, perhaps most of all, for the strength to endure one more day. You do not look for answers. You do not expect comfort. The prayers are simply another part of the rhythm, another stone in the long wall you build around your heart. The Mother Superior's voice rings out in the gloom, stern and unwavering, and you add your own to the chorus. The final Amen hangs in the air like a sigh, and then it is over. You return to your cell at last, feet dragging, body heavy. You crawl onto your pallet, draw the threadbare blanket over your shoulders, and lie in darkness, listening to the distant coughs, the soft sobs, the quiet shuffle of those who cannot sleep. Your last thoughts before sleep are not of hope, but of resignation. Tomorrow will be the same. Wounds, prayers, endless labor, and the cold comfort of routine. You hold on to the smallest flicker of stubbornness, a refusal to give in, to surrender utterly to despair. In this life, sometimes the only prayer worth making is the one that keeps you moving, one foot in front of the other, through another night, into another dawn. Fatigue is no longer a passing visitor in your life. It is your closest companion, as constant and inevitable as hunger, as omnipresent as the cold that seeps through the stones. You wear your exhaustion like a second skin, one that never fits quite right, one that rubs you raw in places you never knew existed. You wake tired, you work tired, you sleep tired, and in your dreams you are just as weary as you are awake. Some mornings you cannot remember a time when your bones did not ache, when your eyes did not burn with the grit of sleeplessness, when your hands did not tremble with the effort of simply existing. Once, long ago, you believed that if you only got enough rest, you might wake refreshed. That illusion died quickly, buried under endless shifts in the infirmary, under the ceaseless calls for help and the never ending march of chores. Your body has learned the language of depletion. Your knees crack when you kneel in prayer, protesting with every motion. Your back feels as if it is bound by iron bands, each movement a test of endurance. Your hands are raw, covered in tiny cuts and half healed burns, the nails rimmed with permanent black. You have become intimately familiar with every sore, every bruise, every muscle that refuses to relax. Sometimes your legs buckle without warning, forcing you to catch yourself against a wall, the world tilting for a breathless moment before you right yourself and continue. Food does little to replenish you. Bread and watery soup cannot rebuild what is constantly broken down. Hunger is fatigue's twin, and together they sap whatever reserves you thought you had. You swallow your meals more from obligation than hope, knowing that no amount of dry crust or limp vegetables will bring back the energy you have lost. There is no privacy in exhaustion. Your fatigue is on display for all to see. How slowly you move, how often you pause to catch your breath, how your head droops during evening prayers. Sometimes the Mother Superior notices and assigns you extra chores, as if more labor will chase away your weariness. Other times, your fellow women glance at you with something like pity, though it is often mixed with irritation. Everyone is tired, after all. No one has the luxury of compassion for your particular suffering. You have grown clever at managing your energy, rationing each movement the way you ration every bite of bread. You learn to lean whenever possible, to use momentum rather than muscle, to sit when you can, and stand only when absolutely necessary. You have even devised a system of micro rests, pausing with your hand on a doorframe, your shoulder against a wall, your head bowed as if in prayer, but really just stealing a second or two to gather yourself before the next ordeal. Your mind is not spared, thoughts move slowly, like carts stuck in deep mud. Simple decisions, where to put the bandages, which patient to check first, take longer than they should. You forget things, a name, a prayer, the last time you washed a particular sheet. At times, the world blurs around the edges, sounds muffled, colors faded. You know this is dangerous, that mistakes here can be fatal, but there is nothing to be done. Fatigue is stronger than willpower, stronger than habit, stronger than anything except fear. The moments that hurt most are the ones that remind you of what you have lost. Once you could run, laugh, sing. You remember those sensations only vaguely now, as if they belonged to another person entirely. Now, even laughter feels like a luxury your body cannot afford. It costs too much breath, too much effort. When you finally collapse onto your pallet at night, Your sleep is shallow and unrestful. Dreams, when they come, are filled with chores left undone, with the faces of the dying, with the endless sound of someone calling your name. You wake as tired as you were when you lay down, the cycle unbroken. Still, you keep moving. Habit is a powerful thing. You do not think about tomorrow or the next day or the endless string of tomorrows that stretch before you. You focus on the task at hand. Fold this bandage, wash that bowl, whisper this prayer, and let the hours carry you forward like a leaf on a sluggish river. Somewhere deep inside, a stubborn ember glows. Call it pride, or defiance, or the last vestige of hope. It is the thing that keeps you from lying down in the straw and refusing to get up, the thing that drags your body out of bed each morning, no matter how much it hurts. It is small and easily overlooked, but you nurture it the way you would a dying fire, with careful attention and whatever scraps of energy you can spare. The body endures. It always does, until it does not. And in this place, endurance is the closest thing you have to victory. Tomorrow you will be tired, the day after too, but you will rise, and you will work, and you will survive, because there is simply no other option. In theory, there is comfort to be found in shared suffering. Misery, they say, loves company, and here, in the relentless churn of the monastery, you are never alone in your hardships. But theory and practice rarely match. Life among your fellow women, your colleagues, your rivals, your only witnesses, breeds not just camaraderie, but competition, suspicion, and a particular kind of pettiness that only flourishes in places where everyone is equally trapped. There are many of you, but only a few whom you truly know. Faces blur together in the half light of the corridors. Voices merge into a background hum of complaints and muttered prayers. You can distinguish some by their posture, their gait, their manner of working. The one who always finishes chores a little too quickly. The one who always seems to be missing when there is heavy lifting. The one whose laugh is a little too sharp, cutting through the gloom like a knife. You have your own reputation, of course. In this world, gossip is as common as lice and almost as persistent. You are known for your patience, or perhaps for your silence, or perhaps for your stubborn refusal to die like so many others. It is impossible to tell what people really think of you, as what is said to your face is rarely what is said behind your back. Cliques form and dissolve with alarming speed. One week, you might find yourself the confidant of a tight knit group, sharing secret scraps of bread or whispered stories after curfew, only to be quietly excluded the next, for a crime as minor as a careless word or a poorly timed joke. The alliances are fragile, built on necessity rather than genuine affection. Today's friend may be tomorrow's rival for a second spoonful of soup or a shift in the less cold section of the dormitory. Some women wield what little power they have with relish, lording it over the rest. The laundry mistress, for instance, guards her stash of clean rags like a dragon, meting them out with a look that dares you to protest. The head cook has favorites, slipping them the crusty ends of bread or a ladle of thicker broth, while others make do with gruel. You learn over time, how to ask without begging, how to accept favors without owing too much, how to avoid drawing the ire of those who can make your life more miserable than it already is. There are arguments, naturally. Fatigue makes tempers short, and the stress of endless work turns minor annoyances into epic grievances. Someone forgets to refill the water bucket, and suddenly you are at the center of a screaming match that ends only when the Mother Superior appears, icy calm, to threaten everyone with an extra night of scrubbing privies. In these moments, solidarity dissolves. Everyone fights for themselves, each convinced that her suffering is unique, her burden the heaviest. And yet, there are flashes of kindness. When you are too ill to stand, someone will bring you a cup of water. When your dress tears beyond mending, an older woman will silently press a patched scrap into your hand. These moments are rare and fleeting, and sometimes you wonder if you imagined them, but you cling to them all the same. Jealousy is an undercurrent in every relationship. You envy the girl who receives a letter from home, the novice whose cheeks are still round with youth, the woman who can sleep through the night without waking to coughs or nightmares. They, in turn, envy whatever it is you possess, your resilience, perhaps, or simply your luck in not having died yet. You are acutely aware of the dangers of friendship here. Attachment is risky, loss is inevitable. Too many times you have woken to find an empty pallet beside you, its occupant carried away by fever or despair or a letter summoning her home. Grief is a luxury you cannot afford, so you teach yourself to keep a little distance, to offer comfort without making promises. Rivalries simmer beneath the surface. Some women compete for the favor of the superiors, angling for lighter duties or better meals. Others take pride in being martyrs, suffering loudly so that everyone knows how hard they work. There are those who hoard information, trading gossip for small privileges, a fresh bandage, an extra turn at the fire. You try to stay out of these games, but sometimes you are drawn in against your will, simply because no one can truly remain neutral in a world so small and so fraught. The worst fights are silent ones, carried out in glances, in cold shoulders, and carefully avoided eye contact. There is a language to these battles, a lexicon of sighs and shrugs that you have learned to read as clearly as any book. You become skilled at navigating the labyrinth of alliances, keeping your head down when necessary, speaking up only when silence would cost you more. Sometimes you miss what passes for companionship here, the quiet, unspoken understanding that for all your differences, you are all bound by the same invisible chains. On rare nights, when exhaustion brings the guard down, you find yourself sharing a laugh, a memory, even a hope for a future beyond these walls. These moments are bittersweet, reminding you of what could be in another life, another world. But morning always comes, and with it, the return of suspicion, the sharpening of rivalries. You remember that here, survival depends as much on caution as on cooperation. You carry on, wary but not entirely ungrateful, learning to accept what small gestures of kindness come your way, while never forgetting that, in the end, you are each alone in your endurance, because here, In the monastery, even friendship is just another test of your strength. Solitude is not so much a privilege here as a brief accident, a gap in the relentless machinery of necessity. The day is filled with people, superiors barking orders, patients crying out, the ceaseless shuffle and sigh of your fellow women. But sometimes, by chance or by the strange mercy of exhaustion, you find yourself alone. It is always fleeting, a pause in the corridor after evening prayers, a sliver of stillness before dawn, or the hush that settles when everyone else is occupied with chores on the far side of the monastery grounds. You have learned to cherish these moments, even if you are never quite sure what to do with them. At first, when you were new to this place and still clung to hope like a blanket, you used solitude to remember the world outside these walls. The feel of grass under your bare feet, the sound of your mother's voice, the weight of a summer sun. But with each passing season, those memories have faded. Now, left alone, your thoughts circle instead around the present, around the ache in your back, the dirt under your fingernails, the next thing that must be cleaned or carried or endured. Still, when you do have a moment, you linger in it, a stolen breath before the plunge back into duty. Sometimes you hide in the alcove beside the storeroom, pretending to count the jars of dried herbs. Sometimes you slip into the empty chapel, letting the candlelight cast strange shadows on the stone floor. Sometimes you sit on your narrow pallet, hands in your lap, eyes tracing the cracks in the wall as if they might spell out some secret message meant just for you. In these rare silences, the noise of your own mind is almost overwhelming. Regrets swirl up like dust, things you said in anger, kindnesses left unoffered, the people you could not save. The lives of the wounded flicker through your memory, one after another, a grim procession of faces and voices. You remember their confessions, their last words, the way some clung to your hand while others recoiled as if you carried death itself. You ask yourself impossible questions. What would you do if you were free? Would you still be here if you had any other choice? What if you had run away, or married the wrong man, or been born into a family with money and land? The answers do not matter. The walls will not crumble because you dream of open fields. But the dreaming, however brief, feels like an act of rebellion, a tiny internal mutiny against the tyranny of the everyday. There are moments as you stare at the flickering candle or out through the streaked window when you try to recall your own ambitions. Did you ever want to be more than what you are? Did you have plans, hopes, a sense of possibility? It is hard to say now. Your old self seems to belong to another person entirely, someone softer, more trusting, less resigned. That person is gone, replaced by someone built of caution and endurance, someone who measures time not in years, but in aches and chores and winters survived. Occasionally, the solitude turns sour. The silence that once felt like a blessing grows heavy, oppressive. You become aware of the emptiness of the corridor, the echo of your own breathing. Old fears slip in, fear of sickness, of being forgotten, of dying without anyone to remember your name. You remember the stories told by older women about ghosts, about spirits who linger in lonely places, searching for the warmth of a human voice. You wonder if that is your future, a wraith haunting the monastery long after your body has given up. But more often, the solitude is simply a relief, a moment to gather yourself, to steel your mind against the next assault of noise and need. You might pick at the hem of your dress, turning over a loose thread, or simply close your eyes and pretend, for the length of a single breath, that the world is different. You listen to the wind against the window, the distant call of a night bird, the hush that comes when everyone else has finally fallen asleep. On the rarest of nights, when the sky is clear and your work is done, you slip outside into the courtyard. You stand under the stars, arms wrapped tight against the chill, and let your mind wander up and away, past the stone walls and the ringing bells, out into the endless dark. For those few minutes, you are not a nurse, nor a servant, nor a weary comforter of the dying. You are simply yourself, no title, no duty, no expectations. But the night does not last. The bell will ring, a door will open, someone will call your name, and you will return to your place in the endless cycle. The memory of your solitude will fade, pressed out by noise and need. But you carry something of it with you, a small, hard kernel of quiet at the center of all the chaos. That is how you survive, not by strength or hope or faith, but by guarding these moments of solitude, these scraps of selfhood that no one can take. They are your secret, your rebellion, your silent promise that beneath the layers of fatigue and obedience, you are still alive. Night does not bring peace. It only changes the shape of your unrest, casting your fears into new and sharper relief. As the last candle gutters and the echo of evening prayer dies, you are left alone with the darkness, and it is then, only then, that the true weight of everything you have seen and done presses down upon you. You lie on your pallet, the thin blanket pulled up to your chin, your body curled into itself against the chill that creeps from the flagstones. The air is thick with the smell of mildew, sweat, and old straw. Somewhere in the rafters, something, rat or bird you never know, scrapes and shuffles, making the shadows twitch along the walls. Every so often, a cough or a muffled sob filters through the stone, proof that you are not the only one haunted by the night. Sleep is rarely easy, and when it comes, it is a fragile thing, easily shattered. The sounds of the day replay behind your closed eyelids. The groans of the dying, the wet rattle in a patient's chest, the slap of bare feet on the corridor stones. You hear your own voice, too, repeating the same words of comfort over and over, the phrases worn so smooth they have lost all meaning. Even in dreams, you are tending wounds, cleaning floors, carrying buckets heavy with things best forgotten. Sometimes, the faces of the dead come to visit. Their eyes find yours in the dark, mouths twisted as if caught between accusation and pleading. You see the soldier whose bandages you changed 3 times before the infection won. You see the girl who held your hand as she burned with fever, her fingers slipping from yours at dawn. You see those You barely remember, so many now that they crowd together, faceless and pale, their names long since lost to you. They do not speak. They do not have to. Their silence is worse than any words. Worse still are the nights when sleep refuses you altogether. You lie awake, counting the cracks in the ceiling, measuring time by the slow, maddening drip of water from a leaky gutter outside your window. Your mind spins through old anxieties. Have you forgotten to change a dressing, to check on a feverish patient, to lock the storeroom door? Every failure, real or imagined, comes crawling back in the small hours, gnawing at your resolve. On these nights, your heart pounds with a strange animal fear, fear that you will never leave this place, fear that you will fall ill and die alone in your cell, fear that no one will remember you when you are gone. You think of the stories you have heard, the ones about souls who wander after death, searching for something they cannot name. Sometimes you believe you are already one of them, haunting your own life. Dreams, when they do come, are rarely kind. In them, you are always running through endless corridors lined with empty beds, through fields of mud and bone, through rooms that shift and change whenever you try to find your way out. You dream of the monastery burning, of screams echoing off stone, of a flood that sweeps everything away. Yet somehow you are always left behind, clutching a bucket or a bandage, trying to save what cannot be saved. There are brighter dreams, too, though they are cruel in their own way. Sometimes you dream of home, of a mother's arms, or a sunny morning long past, only to wake and find yourself clutching the edge of your straw mattress, the taste of loss sharp in your mouth. Sometimes you dream of laughter, of soft bread, of a voice singing your name, dreams so vivid you want to reach out and hold them close. But morning comes, and with it, the gray reality of the monastery, the cold floor beneath your feet, the endless work waiting to be done. You try not to speak of your dreams. Here, sharing them is dangerous. Some say that dreams are messages from the divine, others that they are the whispers of demons. In any case, dreams are private, too fragile to survive in the harsh daylight, too strange to be understood by those who have their own nightmares to tend. Sometimes, after a particularly bad night, you rise before dawn and make your way to the chapel, sitting in the silence, your hands curled in your lap. You do not pray for peace. You have learned that peace, like hope, is a scarce commodity. Instead, you pray simply to endure, to make it through another night, another dream, another day. In the end, the fears and the dreams alike are just more burdens to carry. You add them to your load, shoulder them along with your fatigue and your endless duties, and move forward through the gloom. The sun will rise, as it always does, and you will rise with it, no matter how heavy the night has been. Because here, in this world of perpetual twilight, the only thing more reliable than the darkness is your own stubborn persistence. If life here is a gray sky, then the small moments of happiness are flashes of sunlight so faint and fleeting that you are never sure if you imagined them. You do not expect joy anymore. Expectation is a dangerous game in a place that punishes hope. Instead, You learn to catch these moments the way a beggar might snatch a stray coin, quickly, before someone notices, before the world decides you have not suffered enough to earn it. The source of these joys is rarely grand. It is the opposite, in fact. Tiny things, so ordinary that in another life you would never have noticed them at all. Sometimes it is the way a shaft of sunlight falls through the high window of the infirmary, turning the dust motes to gold. Sometimes it is the sharp, crisp air of early morning before the world has yet remembered to be cruel. Sometimes it is the clumsy thanks from a patient who recovers enough to sit up and drink broth on his own, his voice hoarse but grateful. One afternoon, as you carry a bucket of soiled linens down the hall, you catch the scent of bread baking, real bread, not the hard rations usually reserved for the likes of you. The cook, in an uncharacteristic act of mercy, lets you break off a small, warm piece. You savor it in secret, hidden away in a corner, letting the crust melt on your tongue. The taste is so rich, so overwhelmingly real, that you have to blink back tears. You swallow quickly, looking over your shoulder, afraid someone will see and demand you share. There is laughter too, though it comes at strange times and often catches you off guard. A joke whispered over the washtubs, a ridiculous story traded at the end of a long shift, a knowing look exchanged when a superior's back is turned. You learn to cover your mouth with your hand, to hide your smile, to stifle your laughter before it can escape and draw attention. In this place, laughter is an act of rebellion, a reminder that misery cannot kill everything inside you. You find joy in the unexpected, in the moments that break the monotony of suffering. Once, a child recovering from fever draws you a picture, just a few shaky lines on a scrap of linen, but it is a picture of you, unmistakable with your hair pulled back and your ever present frown. You pin it inside your dress, a secret token against the day's hardships. Another time, a patient gifts you a handful of wildflowers pilfered from the garden, their colors faded but still defiant. You press them in a book and carry them with you, a fragile bit of spring in the middle of the endless winter. There are times when you and another woman pause in your work and simply stand together, silent, watching the dusk fall through the windows. No words are spoken. There is no need. In that moment, companionship is enough, the shared acknowledgement that you are still here, still breathing, still capable of standing upright. You draw strength from these silences, from the knowledge that you are not entirely alone, even if you sometimes feel that way. The most bittersweet moments of happiness come from the victories, however small. A wound that finally closes instead of festering, a fever that breaks in the night, leaving a patient weak but alive. Each recovery feels like a miracle, a brief triumph snatched from the jaws of constant defeat. You allow yourself a quiet satisfaction, a moment to breathe before the next crisis arrives to steal your attention. But the world here does not tolerate happiness for long. Just when you let yourself relax, the wheel turns, and the patient you hoped would live slips away in the night. The bread runs out. The laughter is silenced by the sharp voice of a superior or the ringing of the prayer bell. The wildflowers crumble to dust in your pocket, leaving only a faint, sweet scent and the memory of color. You learn, eventually, to take these fleeting joys as they come without asking too much of them. You do not try to hoard them, that is pointless. Like water cupped in your hands, they slip through your fingers if you cling too tightly. Instead, you hold them lightly, knowing they are all the comfort you are likely to get. Some nights, when sleep eludes you and the old fears creep in, you pull out the child's drawing or the pressed flowers or simply recall the taste of that stolen piece of bread. You let the memory linger, a soft glow in the darkness, and for a little while, you remember what it is to feel something other than exhaustion, grief, or numb resignation. It is not enough. It will never be enough to erase the weight of this life, but it is something. It is yours. And so you rise each day, prepared to endure whatever comes, looking for the next small thing, a word, a smile, a patch of sunlight to carry you through. In this way, joy becomes your secret strength, not a cure, but a reason, however small, to keep going. Because even here, even now, you have not forgotten how to recognize happiness when it comes, however briefly, however quietly, and that in a world so determined to grind you down is the greatest act of defiance of all. You are not a healer by training. No one here is, not truly. The monastery's physician comes when he can, an old man with shaking hands and a beard full of crumbs. But most of the time, it is you and the other women who become the stewards of health and death. Your medicine is the kind taught by necessity, passed down in whispers and hurried demonstrations, half knowledge and half hope. Your day begins with herbs. The apothecary is a cramped, shadowy room, smelling of earth and rot, lined with bundles of dried leaves, knotted roots, and jars of mysterious powders. The air is thick with the scent of wormwood, sage, and mold. You quickly learn to tell which herbs soothe, which ones numb, which ones bring sleep, and which ones, if administered incorrectly, will usher in a more permanent peace. It is a precarious art, this balancing of life and death. You gather plants from the overgrown garden, your skirt heavy with dew and mud. You harvest yarrow for wounds, willow bark for fever, mint for the sick who cannot keep food down. Some plants you recognize from your childhood, others you know only by the names. The older women mutter, names that change from village to village, from healer to healer. There is always uncertainty, a wrong root, a moldy sprig, an overlarge dose, and the patient's fate changes before your eyes. Preparation is laborious and never ending. You grind dried herbs with a stone pestle, pounding until your arms ache and your hands sting with resin. You steep flowers and bark in weak wine, straining the liquid into chipped cups. There is no standard for measurement here. A pinch for this, a fistful for that. The rest decided by instinct and desperation. Sometimes, the only guide is the memory of what worked last time, or the whispered caution that more is dangerous. You envy those who work with certainty, the stonecutters who shape rock, the blacksmiths who judge by color and sound. Your work is all risk and guesswork. One dose too little, and the patient screams all night. One drop too much, and he does not wake at all. There is no glory in your failures, only silence and the weight of another body to be wrapped and buried. Occasionally, someone questions your methods. The mother of a fevered child demands to know why the brew is so bitter. A soldier glares as you press a poultice to his festering wound, swearing it only makes things worse. You learn to say little, to shrug, and remind them that options are few. Sometimes they thank you after the fever breaks or the wound closes. More often, they do not. The work stains your fingers green and brown, the smell of strong herbs clinging to your skin long after you have washed. You have cut yourself more times than you care to count, and your palms are cross-hatched with thin, red lines. The taste of wormwood is a permanent companion on your tongue. There is a secret fear that comes with every dose you mix. You know too many stories of well meaning women hanged or burned for their knowledge of plants, for saving a life in the wrong way, or for failing to save it at all. You keep your voice soft when discussing cures, your hands steady and movements modest. You do not want to draw attention either from the superiors or the restless, fearful sick. Despite your caution, you take a quiet pride in your work. When a poultice draws out infection, when a tea soothes a cough, when a fever breaks at dawn, you let yourself believe, if only for a moment, that you are more than just a caretaker of misery. You are a small bulwark against the darkness, a stubborn little force of nature in a world determined to unravel itself. Yet the line between healing and harm is razor thin. You remember every mistake, every accidental overdose, every child who did not wake, every old man who slipped away despite your best efforts. You do not keep count, but your memory does. The faces return in your dreams, sometimes angry, sometimes forgiving, sometimes simply tired. You share your knowledge too, passing it on to the younger women. You teach them how to identify the difference between belladonna and comfrey, how to crush poppy seeds for pain, how to prepare the roots so that the bitterest brews do not turn the stomach. You warn them that the right herb in the wrong hands is as dangerous as any weapon. Most listen, a few do not. The lessons come quickly in this place, and the price of ignorance is always steep. There are days when you wish for more, for real medicine, for a healer with learning, for a world where healing is not guesswork and prayer. But wishing is for those with the luxury of choice. Here, you work with what you have, and you do not expect miracles. Sometimes you wonder if, centuries from now, someone will look back on your potions and poultices and marvel at your ignorance. The thought amuses you, a small, wry comfort in the monotony of your labors. At the end of the day, your hands are stained, your nose full of sharp, earthy scents, your head throbbing from the effort of remembering, judging, hoping. You take one last look at your shelves of bundles and jars, and then close the door, locking your secrets away for another night. You do not expect gratitude. You expect nothing but more work, more uncertainty, more quiet acts of stubborn defiance. This, too, is a kind of comfort, the certainty that whatever else may come, you will face it with the same steady hands, the same careful judgment, the same uneasy blend of courage and caution. Because in a world where so much is out of your control, even the smallest act of healing is a victory worth holding on to. You came to this place, as so many do, clutching faith like a talisman, convinced it would shield you from the world's sharpest edges. Perhaps you were young, or desperate, or simply naive enough to believe that prayer could be armor, that devotion might win you a measure of mercy. It was easy once to trust in miracles. The world was filled with stories, saints who healed with a touch, martyrs whose suffering brought rain to dying crops, women who saw visions and wept tears that turned to pearls. You believed in these stories because you had to. You had nothing else. Now, faith is something you put on each morning with your patched dress, a layer against the cold that never truly keeps you warm. You have learned to mouth the prayers automatically, the words slipping from your tongue as your hands move through their routines. It is not that you have lost faith entirely. No one here dares to risk that, not when hope is as precious and rare as soap. But what remains is worn thin and threadbare, patched over too many times. You still kneel at the appointed hours, your knees pressed into the stone, your mind drifting as the familiar litany rises and falls around you. The candles burn down, the incense clouds the air, and the faces beside you are as hollow eyed and weary as your own. The Mother Superior's voice is strong, unwavering, a pillar for the rest to cling to. You envy her certainty, suspecting it is practiced as much as piety. The prayers, so full of promise, often go unanswered. You whisper for healing, for strength, for an end to suffering. But sickness lingers, wounds fester, and death arrives on silent feet. For every story of a patient who wakes renewed, there are three who slip away quietly, leaving nothing but a twisted sheet and another tally in the ledger of loss. Sometimes, the absence of miracles is more painful than the suffering itself, as if the silence of heaven is a judgment on your inadequacy. You have seen others break under the weight of disappointed hope. A girl, barely grown, who prayed for her mother's fever to break, only to watch her fade day by day, until all that remained was a lock of hair and an empty cot. An old woman, lips cracked from endless prayers, who spends her last hours asking aloud what she has done to deserve such abandonment. These are not stories for feast days or holy sermons. These are the quiet tragedies that haunt the monastery, woven into the fabric of every day. Superstition fills the cracks left by faith. When prayers fail, the women try charms, a sprig of rosemary pinned to a shift, a cross scratched into a beam above the bed, secret rituals performed at midnight when the walls feel thinner and the world more dangerous. You have caught yourself doing it too, kissing the same amulet before sleep, whispering the same words before you step into the ward, even though you know, deep down, that these gestures are only distractions, small attempts to control the uncontrollable. There are moments, fleeting and sharp, when doubt strikes like a knife. You wonder if the saints have turned their backs, If the stories were always just stories, told to keep you moving forward, to give you something to cling to when the world's realities become too heavy. You wonder if faith itself is a kind of madness, a comfort as fragile and temporary as the faint warmth of a cup of broth. Yet for all your doubt, you keep going. It is not faith in miracles that drives you now, but faith in repetition, in habit, in the stubbornness of the human spirit. You pray because you always have, and because the rituals, however empty, give shape to the endless days. You light candles not because you expect an answer, but because the flicker of flame is beautiful in the gloom, a reminder that light exists, however briefly. Sometimes you envy those who believe easily, who can still find solace in the old stories. You watch the novices whisper their hopes into the silence, their eyes bright with untested conviction, and you feel both protective and bitter. You know the world will wear them down, too. It is only a matter of time. Once in a while, you witness something that almost feels miraculous. A wound that closes against all odds. A fever that breaks when you had already prepared for death. A moment of unexpected kindness that leaves you blinking in surprise. But these moments are rare, and you do not trust them. You have learned that joy, like hope, is safest when held at a distance, observed but not embraced. You suspect that real miracles are quieter than you were taught. Not the raising of the dead or the healing of the blind, but the simple fact of survival. A body that persists against the odds, a spirit that endures when it should have broken, a weary woman who rises each morning to do what must be done. Perhaps that is faith enough. Still, you keep your doubts hidden, worn smooth by repetition. You kneel, you pray, you wait. If a miracle comes, you will be grateful, but you no longer expect it. Instead, you have learned to find meaning in the unremarkable, the comfort of routine, the solace of small kindnesses, the persistent flicker of stubborn endurance. And if, in the darkness before dawn, you sometimes whisper your doubts into the silent air, you tell yourself it does not matter. Faith, like everything else in your world, is just another tool for survival, a story you tell to make the next day possible, no matter how little you truly believe. Dusk in the monastery is not a gentle fading, not the slow golden hush that poets write about. It is a closing in, a tightening, as if the world itself is bracing for another long, cold siege. The sun slips behind the crooked roofs and leafless trees, dragging the last scraps of color from the sky. The air grows colder, sharper, and the gray stones under your feet seem to leach the last of your body's warmth. Day's end here is not an invitation to rest, but a reminder that the night brings its own catalog of burdens. Your work does not end with the dying of the light. Evenings are for cleaning up the aftermath, washing away the day's blood, gathering the soiled linens, emptying the slop buckets, straightening the cots that tomorrow will hold the same bodies or new ones, equally broken. Sometimes you pause at a window, looking out at the gathering dark, and catch your reflection in the glass. A hollow face, eyes ringed with fatigue, lips pressed thin by habit. You almost do not recognize yourself. You wonder if anyone would. Meals are no better at dusk than at dawn or noon. The stew is thin, the bread is stale, and the only difference is the lengthening of the shadows across the refectory's battered tables. Conversation is quieter now, each woman speaking as if afraid to break the brittle hush that falls at the close of day. The little warmth from the fire is hoarded by the favored few, while you and others gather in the corners, wrapping your shawls tighter, listening to the soft crack and hiss of burning wood, and wishing for a comfort you barely remember. After supper, prayers resume, longer and more desperate than ever. You kneel with the others, eyes closed, hands clenched, words tumbling out in a litany of exhaustion. You pray for the dying, the sick, the gone, for the strength to face another night, for a miracle that will almost certainly not come. There is no grand conclusion, no heavenly answer, just the slow creak of the benches and the shuffle of tired bodies returning to their cold cells. You move through your last chores of the day with leaden limbs. You check on the sick, changing dressings by candlelight, your shadow stretched thin across the stone walls. The dying are quieter now, voices hoarse from pleading or prayer. You offer what little comfort you can, a damp cloth for a burning forehead, a whisper of reassurance, a promise that the night will pass and dawn will come again. You do not know if you believe it yourself. Returning to your cell is less a relief than a reprieve. The narrow space greets you with its familiar chill, the same damp in the air, the same smells, the same straw mattress, slightly thinner each night. You arrange your pitiful treasures, an old wooden comb, a scrap of colored thread, the smooth pebble from the garden's path, into their places, ritualistic gestures that mean nothing and everything at once. Sleep is not a promise, but a negotiation. You lie down, wrapping your blanket around you as tightly as you can, pressing your eyes shut against the flicker of candlelight from the corridor. Your mind runs over the day, not seeking comfort, but cataloging its hurts. The sharp word from a superior, the silent reproach in a dying patient's eyes, the ache in your bones that grows deeper each night. Sometimes, as you drift toward uneasy sleep, you allow yourself to wonder how many more nights you will endure. You do not expect an answer. The days and nights here blend into each other, one unbroken stretch of labor and cold, punctuated only by the rare, sharp pain of loss or the fleeting sweetness of a stolen smile. You have seen women crumble under the weight of this routine, watched hope bleed out of their faces until only dull habit remains. The future offers no promises. You will wake tomorrow as you did today, aching, hungry, bracing yourself for the familiar rhythm of suffering and survival. There will be no rescue, no revelation, no sudden transformation. The miracle is that you continue at all, that you rise, that you walk, that you do what needs to be done. Endurance is the only light that remains, the stubborn, flickering ember that refuses to die. Sometimes you think of escape, but where would you go? Outside these walls is another world of uncertainty, hunger, and violence. Here, at least, your suffering has a rhythm, your pain a name. Here, at least, you are not invisible, not yet. You fall asleep listening to the sounds of the monastery, the shiver of wind at the windows, the coughs and whispers in the corridor, the soft scurry of rats in the straw. You dream perhaps of a different life, softer beds, warmer rooms, a world where care is not a burden, but a blessing. But the dream always ends the same way, with the morning bell, the cold floor, the endless repetition. Bleakness is your companion, hopelessness your habit, and still, impossibly, you endure, because here, as everywhere, there is nothing else.